This is a part 2 video about getting the job in the UAE. In this one, I want to talk about the interview process specifically. Part 1 was more about my initial thoughts about moving to the UAE, and this one is specifically about the interview process. This was a senior analyst level role in the UAE. So I first got the LinkedIn message from them on 20th of October, and I'll be starting the job on 6th of February. So it took overall about 3 months and a little bit. Some parts of it were rather lengthy and could be lengthier depending on your position. So I'll go through each dates one by one and kind of what was asked and what was the process, and hopefully you can find it helpful if you're in a similar position. So on 20th October, I've got the first LinkedIn message. I responded within the same day, got scheduled for a call with the HR person. And that's like the first call with HR. I wouldn't call it an interview. It doesn't put too much pressure on the candidate at that point, although I would say that it's very important to come up with the good questions that are, important to show that you're interested, and it's important for you to find out what company you're working for, what kind of team it's gonna be, how big it is, things like that. For HR, they're obviously interested in letting you know what the role is to make sure that that fits you and them as well. And they also want to know your salary range and whether you're okay with what they're offering. So that's usually what the first step is, and it was exactly that. It was about 30 minutes. The HR person was able to answer some of the questions, but not job-specific questions as you would expect. The step after that was I was sent a case study, and I was asked to prepare a 3-slide 15-minute presentation on it. Essentially, that presentation and an interview with the 3 heads of departments about 10 days afterwards. One thing that did happen, and we had some technical issues, so the camera wasn't turning, and at some point the audio wasn't translating well, and when you're kind of like under pressure, technical difficulties don't help. I most certainly think that I would have done better in terms of performing and call it impressing them in person as opposed to remote. So the day later, I received an email saying like, hey, you've gone to the next step. Next step is taking this aptitude test and a personality test. The aptitude test would have verbal, numerical, and abstract parts. It took me a little bit of time to prepare for the aptitude test. I definitely wanted to do well. I know some of the things you can't study too much, especially in a short period of time. Thought it would be helpful to go through the practices, go through the kind of the format of the test, or at least what it could be. So I spent a day and a half or so kind of going through a bunch of different free practice questions, aptitude questions. There's quite a few free material out there, and if you really want to go hardcore, there's also like paid material if you really want even more practice tests. For me, I just really wanted to get a hang, get the vibe, get into that mindset, understand, okay, the time is going to be of the essence, and I need to be very concise and make decisions quickly. So a lot of the questions that I practiced for, they were short questions, but they were about 30 to 45 seconds per question, moderately complex. But when I actually took this aptitude test, it was a lot quicker. It was more to 5 to 10 seconds per question, and they were simpler questions. So the time was even more important when I was actually taking the aptitude test, and things like verbal and numerical, I think need a lot of practice on, but logical reasoning and abstract thinking, doing the practice test helped me a ton in that area, because I started in that mindset. I was looking for the patterns, and having done the practice test does make a big difference. So I had to do the aptitude test within 48 hours. For me personally, I think a couple of days were plentiful. If you're able to put in a couple of days of practices, I think that's really all you need. Following that, after the weekend, after I completed the test, I got an email, could we jump on a call? And I wasn't sure what was that about. It was an email from HR. We got on a call, I got my results, and we actually went through the results of the aptitude test and the personality. Surprisingly to myself, I did quite well. I thought I did good, but I didn't think I did all that good, but I ended up being in 97th percentile of all the test takers for this particular test, which I was very shocked about, but it did boost my ego at the time. And then I got a verbal offer of essentially her saying like, hey, we're willing to give you the offer. The number is going to be this, the baseline number that we previously talked about. And in our first chat with the HR person, I did essentially say like, hey, I am expecting more done the baseline number, and she did say that, hey, this would be possible, but it would need to go through exceptions and it need to be approved by multiple levels of approvals. And I said, that's fine with me. So when she gave me a verbal offer, I'm not sure whether if she maybe forgotten that conversation, if, she's probably chatting with quite a few people. I sensed a very drastic tone change from, she's thrilled to show me results and she's thrilled about me joining, to then I was like, oh, you want more? A little bit of a negative tone there. I think she was really expecting me to accept that verbal offer right away. It was very kind of not a great feeling at the time, but I would still recommend countering and at least trying to get more. Trying to, again, not for no reason. You obviously want to have a reason why you're asking more, be it an average salary in that country for that job, or given if you have something about your experience that is worth more than what their baseline is offering. So I would most certainly recommend doing that. It is going to be nerve-wracking for sure. So when I did that, again, tone changed, and she ended up saying, yes, we'll need a few days because this is going to be an exception. We're not planning to do this. We want to pay everyone about the same salary. We don't want to have big salary disparity. So there's going to be lots of reasons that HR will tell you to kind of say like, hey, that's not a possibility, but it's absolutely worth asking. Because if you don't ask, you'll not get it. She said it'll take a few days and then she'll get back to me. So those days were fairly, again, nerve-wracking. At that point, I got very, very excited about the job. And I actually really, really wanted it. I started doing the math on, okay, what's the minimum number would I accept? What are the costs of living? So I was trying to do in all sorts of numbers like that. And I end up coming to a conclusion that it would make sense for me to even accept that baseline number, even if they come back saying like, hey, we can't give you more. I did the math and I said, okay, I'm still interested in the opportunity. Those few days are definitely kind of were stressful, as in I just couldn't wait till they get back to me. I wasn't sure what's going to happen. But about 4 days later, they came back. They gave me a better offer. So I got an email saying, congratulations, we were able to offer you this amount. And it wasn't what I asked for, but it was sort of in the middle. And it was a bump. And as I mentioned, after kind of having the thoughts about, okay, what's the minimum amount I would accept, I was very, very happy that they came back with it. I think it was good. They did state, hey, this is the best we can do. We've gone through all the approvals we could possibly do. This is the best number we can do. Because again, I asked for more. I was very, very thrilled to receive that. That was on 21st of November. I got an offer. So it's about a month later after the LinkedIn message. And essentially the interviews were almost every week. Very, very quick process in terms of kind of interviews and getting back to me and getting to the next step. So following that, it was about gathering the documents. So they sent me a list of documents that they needed. And those are fairly basic. A lot of them, one of those is like photo, copy of a passport, COVID vaccinations, just filling out an application. So those are fairly basic, but one of the points was a tested diploma. So you need your university diploma, and it has to be notarized by a lawyer, stamped by Global Affairs of your country, and then stamped by UAE Embassy. Send it off to a company that essentially does the next steps for you. Again, this is something you can do on your own, but if you haven't done this before and you want a little bit of a quicker process, it does make sense to pay a little bit more for someone else to do it. So also they do know quite a bit more in terms of the process, the documents you need to send in advance. And the company I was dealing with is called LSC Canada. And they were phenomenal in terms of email responses, in terms of telling what exactly needs to happen. Overall, the whole thing took me about a month, and it cost me about $500 Canadian. This completed all the documents they needed from me, and they said essentially at this point they need 10 business days on average to get some kind of employment approved. 12th of January, I got an email saying, congratulations, all the employee approvals are done. When would you like to start? So it's essentially selecting the start date, double checking with kind of the HR rep and the team. And they said essentially I need at least 2 weeks for them to get me the work visa, and all the onboarding trainings are on Monday. So just select a Monday, at least 2 weeks from now. I selected, I was ready to leave. So I selected 30th of January. It was just 2.5 weeks or so. I already have started coaching a lot of people on my team with some of the work that I do. So I was already doing some training on my team to make sure I leave them in a good place. And so I wasn't worried about giving just 2 weeks of notice. Originally, I wanted to give a little bit more to make sure I transition out smoothly. But because this whole application process took this long and document checks, I was already able to do it without saying that I'm leaving. So I was ready to go. And on top of that, I sold my car at this point in time, and essentially I'd done all the trips that I wanted to do, and I was ready to go. So I suggested 30th of January, but also said, hey, I can do the following week if that works better. I got given 6th of February as a start date. So again, as I mentioned earlier, 6th of February is a start date. They reached out first on October 20th, so it took 3 months and a little bit. And again, the interview itself was 1 month. So then the following 2 months is really just the paperwork, wait times, and I found that that's very, very long. I've got my final offer in November, and then it was just really 2 months of kind of paperwork. That's the process. If you have any questions, do let me know. I'm hoping this was helpful, and yeah, I'm pretty thrilled to start working there in a few weeks. And then my next video will be kind of, okay, what is it like, again, having moved there, etc., etc.